once the planning commission is finished with the review of the response to comments, then it would go to the city council. And I believe there was a request for a 30-day public notice of that meeting. Is that?
Well, we said that we would make it so that it's not with the regular council meeting.
A special council meeting.
Yes.
And a 30-day
So we're going to make
between the planning commission meeting and the...
No, not 30-day, but it would be such that it's after the regular council meeting.
Okay. So once the planning commission finishes that, we will notice the council meeting and then proceed with that. Then the council, once they make their determination on the adequacy of the EIR, they would certify it. There'll be a resolution available for them at that meeting. Certify the EIR as adequate, and then proceed into the entitlement phase. And the entitlement phase involves a planning commission consideration of the general plan amendment, the park master plan amendment, and the zoning ordinance amendment. And then it goes to the Park and Recreation Commission for their review of the park master plan amendment and recommendation of the council. And subsequently ending up back at the council. And I think the schedule was September 19th, something like that. And it looks like we're still on schedule for that.
Neil, a couple of things. One, we had tentatively scheduled it for a week after the normal council meeting, or a week and a day. I guess it was a Thursday. That's the regular planning commission meeting.
Wednesday is the regular planning commission.
So I guess it was the following week.
So did Thursday, is
So I
that?
think it's going to be the Thursday.
Okay.
Thursday. The other thing is there's some question as to whether or not we really need to have a, I think, is it a zoning?
Zoning amendment?
Yes,
Zoning code.
because the zoning code, there's language in the zoning code, I think we made a comment in our comments. There's language in the zoning code. Do you remember the language in the zoning code? Some specific language.
The specific language in the zoning code, and I think the section is 17 of 34, where they have a chart of the uses of public lands, and in the chart, one of the allowable uses was for cultural use. And so the question was whether or not a library qualifies as cultural use.
Okay.
And so I think that when we get the final EIR,
Well, I don't know if that's something that they look into, or we need a legal opinion, or what. I think that's a question.
Yeah, and it may be ultimately a decision of the council, because they have to initiate a zoning amendment. That's the only way. There's no applicant here, so the council would have to initiate a zoning amendment. My view of it is that the public facilities district, PFS district, where the library currently is, has a public library as a permitted use. And the POS district has this other kind of generic term, I guess, which leaves it open to interpretation. And the council can make that interpretation. But it seems to me like if you just transferred the public library as a permitted use from the POS, then it's clear and not subject to argument.
I'd like to back up a second. If the council needs to initiate the zoning change
And the general plan.
amendment, then they would need to initiate that in their, I guess, their July meeting or whenever it is they do
Yes.
that in a formal way. So that
Yes.
also needs to be
There'll be a resolution for them to do
for
that.
that.
Yeah.
And then the notice period for that would be
Normal 10-day notice.
A normal
For the
10-day
planning commission hearing,
Okay,
same as the council.
okay, all right. So that would be also the solution in the council meeting when they hear the final draft. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
And maybe what we should do is prepare a draft so that, that maybe the committee can look at that draft beforehand and make sure everything's included in there.
That would be terrific.
I think that's a good idea.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so we'll plan to do that.
Okay. Do we have any discussion or questions, additional questions from our committee?
Now, in the draft, there could be some outline of the processes.
In the resolution, yeah.
So,
One other question.
Just because we've had so much difficulty with the process.
Yes. What is the status of the general plan committee? I probably should know that.
I think that it's been abolished.
It has been.
It's been folded into the plan.
So on our original schedule, we had a slot for the general plan committee to review, but since they're no longer in existence, we'll remove that.
I have a question. When will the draft reviewed by this committee?
this committee is not reviewing
The resolution.
The resolution?
resolution.
That's what, that's.
Well, it would have to be before the council meeting in July. So maybe at your next,
That is the next.
when is your next meeting?
Our next meeting would be,
July 1st, according to.
July
Yeah.
1st.
Well,
So,
July 4th is our meeting, so we don't currently have a July meeting, although one can be scheduled.
well, we have,
If you'll let me know
we'll
when
let
it
you know,
is.
because we have a discussion of future meetings as an agenda item.
Yeah, I can
So
have
we'll
a
discuss
draft.
that.
Why don't you let us know what time you need, so we make sure we give you enough time to draft it? And
Well, if you're gonna have it after July 4th, that would be fine.
Okay.
I've started looking at it.
Okay.
What if it's a little before July 4th?
That can work.
Okay, thanks. So, I just think that, given really, it does seem that there were a lot of comments on the EIR and that there were additional, traffic work done, that certainly this committee, I think we need to discuss just what, whether or not we are supportive of the additional funds,
Yep.
even though we know that it's being managed by the planning department, but
Well, I don't think we have much choice.
I don't have much choice. We do want to complete it.
Yeah.
So we're supportive of.
And I think they've
doing.
done, really good job in making sure that the schedule has been met.
That's correct.
They've been really
And we want,
putting a lot of effort in.
And thorough.
And thorough.
I mean, we want it thorough.
We want it thorough.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want it thorough.
Do we need to do any approval?
No.
That will be up to council.
That's up to council, because the EIR process is being managed by the planning
It's out
department.
of our hands.
Neil, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
See all of you.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Actually, sorry, before you go, do we have any public comments or questions on this item? Before we move on to the next item? Hearing no public comments, we'll close this item and move on to the next.
The next item is roles and responsibilities of the project manager.
Okay. I'd like to,
Your best bet
for
before.
those of you who've not met
Call the chair.
Chris Thompson yet, I'd like to introduce Chris to everybody here. And I'll let maybe you take over the discussion and maybe talk a little bit about the roles and responsibilities that you'll have for this project.
Sure.
Maybe some of the work that you've done so far.
Sure.
Great.
So I'm Chris Thompson with Noble Partners. We were selected through the town's selection process to serve as the project manager through the architect selection and design of the library project. We're a local Palo Alto-based construction and real estate development services company. We've served a lot of local towns and communities on their library projects, most recently completing the City of Gilroy Public Library, which some members of the selection committee for the architect were able to visit on Tuesday. We're engaged and have been on board for the last month or so, helping them. We basically picked up right at the end of the architect RFP process, so we're helping to develop a process for evaluating the proposals that were received, developing a short list, which is done, and actually as of today, we're approaching the completion of the interview process for the architect selection. We interviewed 4 of the 5 shortlisted architects yesterday and have 1 more this afternoon. The committee will be the selection committee, which consists of Denise, Joan, Marion, Tom 14 from the San Mateo County Library, Corrine, and myself. Will be discussing afterwards and developing recommendations for the town to proceed with selection. The selection process will work as follows. Once we develop a ranking of the firms coming out of their interviews, the town, and Mike and I talked about this a little bit this morning, will sit down with the architects to negotiate their fee. All the architects that were shortlisted provided a sealed cost proposal. So we'll take the #1 ranked firm, open their cost proposal, evaluate it against the scope that was presented in the RFP, and ensure that it's that the scope is complete and matches the town's expectations as previously articulated, and that the fee is a fair representation of that. We'll have a little bit of back and forth as needed, hopefully come to a successful agreement with that architectural firm. And then if not, if that isn't successful, we'll move on to the #2 ranked firm, but I'm confident that we'll be able to reach an agreement with the #1 listed firm. Then we'll prepare a report to the town council and a recommendation that the firm be selected, and then we'll get started with conceptual design to try to marry the project or marry the process with the EIR and the process for entitlements. And then once we get through concept design, then we'll really be able to throttle things up a little bit and get started with schematic design and design development. So our next task, once we get through this initial entitlement phase and the zoning amendment and the EIR, will be to develop an overall project schedule that takes us all the way through the design process through construction documents. So we're really excited to be part of the team and look forward to working with everybody. It's been a really great experience so far, and I think we're off to a really good start. So thanks again for letting us and giving us the opportunity to be part of the team. Does anybody have any questions on anything I just covered?
I would welcome you.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to note a few observations for you and as you select the architect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Kathy McKeithen, I'm
Hi.
a council member and have been for about 12 years. And I'm very much in favor of a new library with a lot of caveats and concerns, both for you and for the architect and for the town. My concerns and caveats are these. The town is very careful about how it spends money. It's very concerned about a new library. It's very concerned about the location of a new library and about what kind of building it's going to be and where it's going to be located. And if it should go into the park, and that is still an open question to some extent. And when it spends money, it wants to make sure it spends money wisely. And we on this committee and people in the town, it's their taxpayer dollars, want to make sure that every dime, every penny is spent cautiously. And we've tried to the extent possible, be good stewards of those funds, even when it comes to, and although we don't have much control with regard to the EIR, to the extent we can, we try to be cautious. So we don't like delays. We don't want a building that is out of sorts if it should go in the park, but even if it should go somewhere else. We don't want large buildings. We don't want buildings that are monolithic, and we don't want buildings that are not in keeping with the rural, country-like atmosphere of this town. We want sensitivity to what the people of the town want. We don't want them to present one thing in what they present to you as they propose things, and then another when they come forward with creative drawings, and they need to be careful with that. We want them to work with you and be cognizant of what you and the townspeople want on a day-to-day basis, and keep in touch with you and be aware of cost overruns. Nobody likes it when we talk about bids and they write in a 10 or 15% cost overrun. There are people on the council who the hair on the back of their neck goes up every single time. To them, it's just almost as if it's written in as part of the contract. It's almost like a fait accompli that it's going to cost that additional amount. They hate it. We don't want a grandiose building. We want a building that is going to be something that is not going to be added onto, but is versatile, that is energy efficient, that is going to save money, that is going to be something that can be in keeping with the changing kind of things a library has, like e-books, that is going to be usable for many, many years to come. This library's been around for many years, and we hope whatever this new library is and wherever it is, the same will hold true. Because as you can see, this town doesn't change buildings very often. So it's the people of the town. As much as we've been involved with this new library, it's the people of the town who are going to have the greatest say in what this new library will be. And so ultimately, we want them to be happy. A lot of people haven't been happy so far. And we'd like, when this process is finished, for the people of the town to say, yes, it was a good thing. And so they're going to be looking to you and the architects, and you very much so, to keep your hands on this project. And we can't control you. Purposely, it's you and the city manager who are going to be working together on this, together with the people of the town. And that's really what we want. We don't want to control you, and we shouldn't be controlling you. I'll say it for the tape, and I'm glad this is being taped. We shouldn't be controlling you, and if ever we do, you should be telling us, stand away, because at this point in time, we're not the ones who decide what happens going forward. It's the people of the town, and it's to them and the city manager, in accordance with the proposal, that you have to remain true. Okay?
Thank you for that, and really, some of the consistent themes that we've had both during our selection and in the selection of the architect are a lot of the things that you touched on, making sure that we have a process that everybody buys into, and that we set realistic expectations up front that we can manage to all throughout the process. And those are a lot of the things that have been recurring time and time again as we go through our selection process for the architects, making sure that they understand that this has to have a lot of community consensus and buy-in. So that's why we're really interested in hearing how they manage that process, how they manage that process successfully before on other projects, because I think everybody understands how those are really the highest priorities for this committee, for the town, for the community. So I appreciate everything you said, and hope that we're able to meet all those expectations and exceed them.
I hope so. It's a high threshold, and one that unfortunately I'm not so sure we as a committee have met as much as we've tried. So I can't say that we haven't placed an incredible burden on you. We have.
Sure. Well, and we appreciate feedback, and we're, as I've mentioned to some members of the committee, we're one of the latest additions to the project. So getting background, getting feedback, having people be candid and let us know what's on their minds is really the best way to make sure that we're keeping everybody happy, which is always a challenging task, but it's helpful to get everybody's feedback and to have your understanding. So we appreciate that.
Good. Anything we can do to help you, we're here for you. But we don't want to interfere with the process.
We're here to collaborate.
No, absolutely. That's what we want as well.
So that being said, our hope would be that maybe you can attend our monthly meetings, and we'd be pleased to, in general, keep it at the beginning of our meetings agenda,
Okay.
so that your time can be spent effectively. Of course, you're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but if scheduling, that we would place it at the beginning of the agenda.
Well, my plan is to attend all the steering committee meetings, obviously barring anything that comes up. But our plan is to be here for the duration, and it's important for us to understand because we're dialed in. We're the ones that are responsible along with the town for managing the process. So I think we want to be as dialed in and as plugged in as we can be. So I'm staying all the way till we adjourn today, and will for the rest of the meetings also.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much.
I have a quick question, it's kind of a detail on process. You said that you opened the bid for the first licensed architect. When do you, and what's the process for negotiating the contract?
So, actually, something that Kathy mentioned, I can tie back to that as well. So once we rank our firms, hopefully we'll have that accomplished by the time we conclude today. We may need a couple of days following that. We'll open the cost proposal, which we received in sealed form from each of the firms that are shortlisted. We'll open that proposal, and then the first step will be to look at the scope that was articulated in the RFP. Because architecture and engineering is really boiled down to effort levels and rates. And so we want to make sure that the assumptions that they're making are appropriate to the project, appropriate to the scale of the project, and we're going to use a lot of the recent library projects that we've completed as a baseline for evaluating what we think is reasonable and being able to provide that input. No two projects are the same. We don't necessarily want to compare apples to apples with another project, but it gives us a sense of what do we think is the right level to make sure that the town gets enough service but doesn't have 12 full-time professionals working on the project, burning the meter for the duration of the project. So that's really the process. And we sit down with the shortlisted firm, with the #1 ranked firm, and if we have any concerns or anything that we think is not appropriate to the scale of the project, we have a discussion with them so that they can either provide us with their input or get them to make a correction. And we'll do that iteratively for every portion of their proposal, because they'll have their staff, their sub-consultants, their assumptions as far as schedule, and to the question about avoiding cost overruns. Really, we want to make sure, because this is a very early stage in the project, being able to call out exactly the month when construction documents are going to be complete. We want to get to that point, but by next week when we're having that discussion with the architects, we may not be there just yet. We want to make sure that they understand they owe us the deliverables over the schedule that evolves and ultimately is committed to. We want to get their buy-in on that as well. And that will actually be part of the iterative process, as I said, in our developing an overall project schedule that we can all commit to and manage to. We want to get their buy-in on that as well, so that they're committed to delivering at the same milestones that everybody else on the project is. So that's really the process, and we boil that down to having a complete cost proposal. If they need to make any revisions or changes as a result of that discussion, they'll make them. And as I say, if we get to a point where they're unwilling to make those changes or feel that they can't make the corrections necessary to meet the expectations of the town, they know up front that we'll be moving on to the next firm. So it puts the town in the position of the best leverage to make sure that we get the firm that we want, the team that we want, for the effort levels and for the cost that we think is appropriate. And we'll be working, collaborating with the town staff on that as well to make sure that everybody has their input and that all the concerns and criteria are met.
So that gets into the contract, the actual legal.
Correct. The professional services agreement that the town has will have appendices that articulate both the scope of work, which the architect is committed to, and we want them, again, as I say, we want them to buy into that scope of work, and that's why we have that negotiation process. If there's a hole that we need to fill or something that's in the scope that we feel isn't going to be used or necessary to the project, we either put those things in or take those things out. It becomes part of their agreement. Then their rate schedules and their cost proposal becomes part of the agreement as well. Also the original RFP that led them through the process. So that becomes part of the legal agreement, and that's what we manage.
Okay, and all that happens prior to going to the council?
It will all be developed in draft form for recommendation to the council for acceptance.
I'd just like to take a moment to introduce maybe a couple of people that you haven't met before. Well, Kathy introduced herself, but
I introduced myself.
you introduce yourself? Okay, so I think we're all introduced.
Is
What's
that-
your name again?
Chris.
Last name Thompson.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Any public comments on this item or questions?
I have a little question that maybe Kathy can answer. Since Chris is going to be working so closely with the city manager, how is our city manager process going? Is that?
We're going to be conducting interviews of the top 3 candidates on June 12th. And all 3 at one time, successive times during the day. And then we will meet and determine our top 2 candidates. Will be doing background and reference checks. We'll have those at the
So by the end of June, hopefully to
I
have
would
someone in
certainly
place?
hope by the end of June, yes.
Perfect.
We'll have a new town manager on site by the end of June?
Well, no, that depends upon what kind of notice he or she has to
Thank
give.
you. Okay.
Were there many applications?
Over 50.
Oh, my goodness.
I had heard somewhat 45.
Is it the free house or the big paycheck?
You know, I wanna bring our conversation back to the items on the agenda.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Denise, can I have a public comment? Chris, I'm Wally Sleeth, I live in Atherton. I don't mean to challenge you here, but I'm curious because certainly in the private world, I don't think I would see them being done seriatim, opening and then finally opening the cost. Can you give us any more ideas to why that's the way it's done, or is that the way it's always done in public arena? I mean, I don't think that's the way I see it being done in the private world.
And you're right. The public process can be a little bit different. The private sector can have cost proposals submitted along with. There's nothing that binds you to having sealed cost proposals. Oh, the simple answer is that the process that was described in the RFP that was issued, actually prior to our involvement, articulated that process. So we're committed to, to being consistent with the process that was already established. But you're right, there are a multitude of selection options that exist both in the public and private sector and are compliant with the town's code for selection. This is the one that was selected for use, and so we're being consistent with that process.
And actually, through the public process, there's typically just two types, and it's really dictated by law. One is a bid, and one is a qualifications-based selected. Bids is a process you go through when things are pretty well defined. So, for instance, construction. So, after the architect completes the design, then it'll go out to bid, and basically the winner is determined by low cost, pure and simple. For professional services, it's dictated that you don't low bid it. It's really more of a qualifications-based, and to ensure that it's qualifications-based, that's why there's always a two-envelope system. At first you choose based on the quality, and then at that point, then you open up their cost proposals. And as Chris indicated, that then through the negotiation process, if the town is unable to negotiate what the town believes is a fair contract, then what they would do then is go to the second-ranked firm and open that envelope and go through that same process.
This is probably a dumb question. How do you know whether the costs, whether it's worthwhile negotiating until you open the second or the third and see what the costs are there?
Well, one indicator, and what was required in the proposals, is for them to develop a detailed scope of work with estimate of hours, the level of effort. And although different firms vary, the cost per hour isn't going to vary tremendously. So a good indicator is really that detailed scope of work and their estimate of hours. That's a good, when you're taking a look at comparative costs, if, one firm says it's going to take 1,000 hours, if another proposal says it's going to take 500, not exact, but, generally speaking, the 1,000 hours is going to be significantly more than the 500 hours. So that's always an indicator. And they are required to submit a detailed scope of services along with their person-hour estimates as part of the actual proposal.
Thank you.
And there are a couple of firms that are among those that are a little bit further out of the area. So we take into account not only just professional fees, but also reimbursable expenses, travel expenses as applicable, because we understand that it all comes to the same bottom line. So we want to make sure that we're getting the best value overall. And to add some detail to something that Mike said, when we get to the point of being able to get the project ready for bid, there are some options that are available that are compatible with town code, with public contract code, that enable us to make sure that we don't necessarily have to, as they say, throw the project out on the street and make it available to anybody who has the lowest number, because we want to make sure the town gets the best value for all the services that it's buying out, including construction. So there are pre-qualification and some other things that we've talked a little bit about that we'll start to discuss more as we get a little bit further down the road. But we want to make sure that we engage the most qualified and the firm with the best value. So there is a way to be able to get both things in the public process, and we've been able to successfully implement that on some past projects, and we look forward to providing those recommendations to the town as well to make sure that this project is successful.
I would imagine that a lot of it would depend upon your expertise, because you know, the scope of it would vary depending upon the design. You know, one architect might have a certain kind of a window or a certain kind of a child's area that is different from another architect's, and so it's not apples to apples. So how could you say that because one architect says it's going to take 500 hours to design this area, and another says it's going to take 200, that necessarily, you know, or that it costs more per hour? It may mean that there's a certain degree of difficulty in the kind of design required. But you would know that and know that there's an additional kind of expertise and what that expertise per hour goes for. So I would imagine that we're depending upon your expertise to determine what the going dollar value is and whether or not it's inordinate or extreme and we're looking to you to bargain and save us money.
Well, you know, every project that we manage, and this is particular to me and particular to my colleagues as well, we manage the dollars as though they're our own. And so we want to make sure that we get the best value. We want to make sure that we're fighting for the things that are important to the town, and that if there's something in the scope of this in the proposal that we feel isn't necessary, we don't want to pay for it. And if there's something that we feel is necessary, we want to make sure that it's part of it up front so it doesn't become a surprise down the road. But as I mentioned earlier, we've recently completed several libraries of similar, no two are the same, but similar scale, similar size for Palo Alto and for some other close communities. We finished a project for the town of Belmont not that long ago. So we have a lot of metrics and comparables. No two projects are the same. We're not looking to achieve a line-by-line comparison, but we do have a sense of what's appropriate based on the size and scale, because there's a lot of unknowns right now, and we have to make sure that we're not getting down the road and the architect has scope changes or articulates a design that's different than the assumptions made up front, because the assumptions up front right now are just based on the phase one work. There's a lot of open-ended things that we want them to be able to deliver services on without articulating a change. So we're very conscious of that.
See, I remember speaking with Portola Valley and also with Sacred Heart, and in both cases, I remember Sandy at Sacred Heart and the city manager in Portola Valley, both of them talked about their project manager and the importance of the project manager in saving large sums of money because of their expertise in the project. And that's hopefully what our project manager will do.
As I say, our goal is to make sure the town gets the best services with the best value. That's really what we consider the best success.
Any other comments or questions?
I'm fine.
So we'll close this item and move, and thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Next item on the agenda.
Architect selection process.
Which we just started right the over.
Probably in what I said earlier, I probably encroached a little bit on the next agenda item, but I kind of articulated the process a little bit as I was talking about our roles and responsibilities. But would anybody like me to recap anything further? Does anybody have any further questions about the architect selection process?
Are you pleased with the choices?
We received 16 proposals, or the town received 16 proposals, and I think every firm that submitted was reasonably to highly qualified. I think we have a challenging decision to make, but there are, our evaluations so far have shown that we have some really qualified firms, and I think we'll have a front runner or front runners identified by the end of the day today. But I'm personally very pleased with the proposals that the town received. I think we had some really good firms that have done some really great projects both locally and elsewhere that bode well for having a really qualified firm on board for this.
Chris, would you define challenging, please?
Which,
You said we had some challenges in this selection process.
oh, it's when we have a numerous qualified firm. I mean, say that we have, take the short list of firms that we have. If we shortlist a firm, it's basically our way of, if the committee shortlists a firm, it's basically a way of saying, if we were to choose any one of these firms, we would probably have a successful project and have a successful experience. When you have several firms that are highly qualified, that have all done successful projects close to locally or elsewhere, it makes the decision more difficult, as opposed to if you have one firm that's highly qualified and everybody else isn't. it makes the distinction, it makes the selection, very black and white, whereas in this case, we have highly qualified, just like I'm sure for the city manager or town manager selection process, if you have 5 people that you all think would do a good job, it's, makes it all that much more challenging to pick number 1.
Thanks.
Do you believe all of these firms rate high as to sensitivity to surroundings and responsive to community?
That's something that was specifically asked to be discussed as part of the interviews. It was articulated in the letter that was sent to the shortlisted firms, and it's something that I know the selection committee has spent a lot of time discussing with each one of the firms during their interview. It's first and foremost in everybody's mind, I think.
Because I think those are 2 very important elements.
I agree.
Has your firm or you worked with any of the top 5?
Yes. We've worked with 2 of the top 5 of the shortlisted firms that are being interviewed right now. One is WRNS Studio, who's working with one of my coworkers on a project up at the Linear Accelerator, SLAC, right now. And then Harley Ellis Devereaux, we've worked with on 2 prior projects. One, the city of Gilroy Library, which just completed, was a very successful project. It's significantly larger than the project imagined for the town. It's about 50,000 square feet, much larger, but a very successful project, and my coworkers had a really positive experience working with them. That firm was previously known as Fields and Devereaux. They were the architect for the historical renovation of Green Library West, otherwise known as the Bing Wing at Stanford. And that was a project where we were actually brought in. It was a troubled project on which we weren't the original project manager. We were brought in to help the university complete that project with Fields and Devereaux. This was about maybe 17 or 18 years ago. So we worked with them on 2 prior occasions, one long ago and one very recent.
Have all of these firms worked on small projects?
Yes, they have. That was